sleepyheads. I know you had a tough day. Maybe your thoughts are still swirling, or your body just wants a break. So come close, wrap yourself in something soft, and take a deep breath with me. Now tell me, buddies, where are you watching from? And what time is it? Wherever you are, you're safe here. Okay, let's begin. Let's help you fall asleep. It was just another quiet morning, in the middle of nowhere. The sky was pale blue, the windmill turned slowly, and Courage, the little pink dog, was out in the backyard, chasing shadows and butterflies. Muriel hummed in the kitchen, whipping up her famous fluffy pancakes, and Eustace, well, he was snoring loud enough to shake the roof tiles. But something strange was about to grow in that quiet desert dirt. As Courage sniffed around near the old fence line, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. A tiny sprout. Green, soft, shimmering just slightly in the sun. He tilted his head, blinked once, then twice. What was that doing here? There had never been anything green in nowhere. At least not like this. By the time Muriel called him in for breakfast, the little sprout had already doubled in height. But Courage, ever faithful and curious, just tucked the thought in the back of his mind as he joined Muriel for pancakes and tea. Outside, the sun rose higher. And that little sprout? It wasn't so little anymore. Within minutes, it had stretched toward the sky, branches forming, leaves unfurling. By lunchtime, a tree stood in the yard, tall, elegant, and humming with life. Eustace, finally awake and grumpy, stepped out onto the porch with a scowl. "What's that ridiculous thing? A tree in my dirt?" He waved his newspaper at it. It didn't care. It stood peacefully, quietly, as if it had always belonged there. Muriel came out with a fresh cup of tea, eyes wide with wonder. "Oh, my! It's beautiful!" Courage wagged his tail. He didn't trust it, but it sure looked peaceful. That night, as the stars blinked awake, Courage sat beneath the tree. It glowed ever so faintly, warm, golden, like a lantern from some forgotten dream. And the air, it smelled of honey, and something older, like stories left untold. In his sleep, Courage dreamed of green valleys, of laughter in the wind, of Muriel dancing among the leaves. He didn't know why. He didn't question it. The tree was magic. But as with all things in nowhere, peace doesn't always last. The next morning, Eustace was already digging around the base of the tree. "It's ruining my soil. I can't grow nothing with this here thing." He grumbled and shouted and kicked at the roots. But the tree, it didn't budge. Its leaves rustled softly, almost as if whispering, "Be still." Muriel asked Courage to water it. He did, with love. The flowers blooming at its base now glowed tiny orbs of pink and white, like miniature lanterns. The birds came back. The bees buzzed again. For the first time ever, nowhere didn't feel so empty. It felt alive. But that bothered Eustace. He called the local tree removal guy. Big machine, loud engine, a man with sunglasses and no patience. They brought chains, axes, claws. Courage hid behind the chicken coop, trembling. The tree stood tall, unshaken. The men tried to cut it, but every time they swung, the tools bounced back like rubber. Muriel touched the bark gently. "It's protecting us, you see. It knows." Eustace rolled his eyes. "Knows what?" "It's a dumb tree." But then the wind changed. The sky dimmed slightly and the leaves began to sing. Yes, sing. A low humming melody that wrapped around the house, curling into every window, every room. Even Eustace's hat lifted off his head slightly, like the wind was nudging it free. Courage stepped forward. He placed his paw on the bark. It was warm, like a heartbeat. He didn't say a word. He just listened. The tree whispered back. Not in words, but in memories. The tree whispered. Not in words, but in feelings. Courage stood still, his paw gently resting on the bark, his ears twitching ever so slightly, as if hearing echoes from a forgotten time. He saw visions of Muriel as a child planting daisies, of an old cottage surrounded by gardens, of warmth and home. The tree remembered joy, and it shared that memory with Courage. Back inside, Muriel was softly rocking in her chair, knitting a blanket made of gentle pastel yarns. She looked out the window and smiled. That tree makes me feel safe, like someone's watching over us. Courage nodded. He didn't fully understand why, but he felt it too. But not everyone was feeling calm. Eustace was busy rummaging through the shed, muttering to himself, "If no one's going to chop it down, I'll do it myself." He pulled out a rusted axe, heavy, crooked handle, blade dull from years of sitting unused. He marched toward the tree like a soldier on a mission. Courage followed, tail low, ears folded, heart pounding. The axe lifted. But the moment Eustace swung clang. The axe stopped in midair, frozen, held on by the tree itself. No, not quite. Its branches had moved, not in anger, but in defense. They gently wrapped around the blade, turned it downward, and set it softly on the ground. Eustace blinked. He wasn't scared, but he was confused. "Dumb tree," he muttered, backing away. That night the wind returned. It wasn't cold. It wasn't loud. It was like a lullaby, like the world itself was humming Courage to sleep. He lay curled at the base of the tree, watching its branches sway under the stars. Tiny fireflies floated around it. They weren't scared, they danced. Courage drifted into sleep, his dreams filled with glowing forests, gentle winds, and laughter echoing softly in the leaves. But as dawn approached, a shadow loomed. From far off in the desert, a black van crept forward, dust clouds rising behind it. Inside sat two men, sunglasses, suits, and silence. They were from the agency, the kind that doesn't like unexplained miracles. And the tree? Well, it had drawn attention. As the sun rose, Courage woke to the sound of tires crunching gravel. He peeked from behind the tree, ears alert. The men stepped out. One held a clipboard, the other a strange scanner that blinked red every time it pointed at the tree. "Unregistered anomaly," one of them said. "Could be alien, or magical. Doesn't matter, remove it." Muriel stepped outside with a cup of tea. "Oh, hello, dears. Can I help you?" The men didn't smile. "We need to study that tree, ma'am. Please step back." Courage whimpered. The tree shivered, not from fear, but like it knew this was a test. The agents brought strange tools, buzzing saws, mechanical arms, a device that hummed like a swarm of bees. But when they touched the bark, nothing worked. The saws stopped. The arms jammed. The scanner exploded in sparks. The tree stood tall, still, unbothered. Its roots spread a little deeper, not to escape, but to anchor, as if to say, "I'm not going anywhere." That night, Courage curled up near the trunk again. He felt tired, not scared, just thoughtful. He looked up at the leaves. They were glowing again, faintly. He placed a paw on the bark and whispered, "Thank you." And for the first time, he heard a whisper back, "You're welcome." But it wasn't scary, it wasn't loud. It was like hearing a memory. The tree had become part of the family, a silent protector, a memory keeper. And as Courage drifted off again, He dreamed not of monsters, but of gardens, of laughter, of peace. Morning came again to nowhere. But this time, something was different. The sky had a golden hue, as if the sun itself had overslept, and was peeking out gently behind the clouds. The tree stood peacefully in the yard, but its branches now held small, glowing fruit, pearlescent, round, like little orbs filled with stardust. Courage blinked up at them, tilted his head, and gave a small "Who?" He tapped one with his paw, and it pulsed warmly. Not hot, not cold, just gentle. Muriel came outside in her slippers and robe, a mug of tea in one hand and a sleepy smile on her face. "Oh, aren't they lovely?" She reached out, and one of the fruits dropped right into her hand without her picking it. Courage's ears perked. "Oh, fancy fruit," Muriel chuckled. She took a bite, and her eyes lit up. "Tastes like honeyed apple pie, mixed with sunshine." Eustace, peeking from the window, grunted. "Bah, probably poison." But the truth, it wasn't food. Not exactly. The fruit was memory, softly sweet. It reminded Muriel of her childhood, of picnics on the hillside, of laughter from her little brother. Each fruit held something different, something personal. And when Courage sniffed one, he saw a moment him as a pup, Muriel hugging him tight on a stormy night, saying softly, "Don't be scared. I've got you." His tail wagged slowly. A single happy tear rolled down his face. But the tree, it wasn't finished giving. Over the next few days, wildflowers bloomed in perfect circles around it. Bees visited in quiet harmony. Birds made nests and sang lullabies at dusk. Muriel planted a bench beside it so she could sit and read or nap under its branches. Courage often laid at her feet, paws twitching slightly as he dreamed. Eustace, meanwhile, tried to ignore it. He raked around it angrily, sprinkled salt on the soil, and even tried to post a "for sale" sign next to it. Stupid tree, ruining my yard. But the truth was, he felt something too. He just didn't know how to admit it. One afternoon, Courage found Eustace sitting on the porch alone, his head lowered, hat in his hands. The tree cast a gentle shadow over him, protective. Eustace looked up at the sky. I had a tree like this once, back on the farm. He paused, spoke again a little softer. My brother and I used to climb it. Got stuck once. Ma had to pull us down with a broomstick. He chuckled just barely. Courage didn't say a word, just sat beside him. The tree said nothing either, but the wind carried something soft, like a sigh or a memory shared in silence. That night, Muriel placed a little lantern on the tree. It glowed softly, not to light the yard, but to keep the dreams warm. Courage curled up underneath it, breathing slow, steady, safe. He dreamed again. This time he saw nowhere not barren, but full of life. A garden bloomed in the middle of the desert. Children laughed. Muriel danced in the distance. And the tree stood tall, its roots spreading wide, its leaves reaching up like hands in prayer. Back in the waking world, something even stranger happened. Muriel woke up one morning feeling young again. Her joints didn't ache. Her smile came easier. She stretched, and even did a little twirl in the kitchen. "Must be the tree," she giggled. Eustace looked at her, then at the window. "Tree's up to something," he grumbled. But he didn't stop her. Later that day, a letter arrived, delivered by a pigeon wearing tiny goggles. Yes, goggles. Courage took it carefully and brought it to Muriel. The letter was simple. "Thank you for protecting one of the last trees. You've earned peace. Signed, The Watchers." Muriel blinked. The Watchers. My, that's mysterious. Courage tilted his head. Eustace scratched his chin. Is this some kind of prank? But the tree shimmered slightly in the light, like it was smiling too. That evening, Muriel placed her rocking chair right under the tree. Eustace joined her, grumbling, of course, but he sat quietly beside her. Courage curled up at their feet. The leaves swayed, the stars blinked above, and nowhere felt full of everything. Memories, quiet joy, and peaceful dreams. The tree stood tall, quiet in the cool night breeze, bathed in soft moonlight. Its branches barely moved, but the whole yard seemed to breathe with it like the world itself was in rhythm with something older and kinder. Muriel slept gently in her rocking chair, wrapped in a quilt, her tea long finished. Eustace beside her had his hat pulled down over his eyes. He wasn't snoring this time, just breathing soft and slow. Even he was resting. Courage lay beneath the bench, his little paws tucked under him, his ears twitching in sleep. The magic of the tree was no longer loud or glowing. It was quiet now, subtle, like a lullaby you hum without realizing. It had done its job not by casting spells, but by simply being there. Courage's dream that night was the most vivid yet. He was in a field of trees, hundreds, no, thousands of them, all glowing softly, all humming in harmony. Each tree held memories, not just his, but everyone's. Memories of kindness, of hugs, of birthdays and thunderstorms survived, of people long gone and smiles that once were. One tree in that forest looked just like the one in nowhere. It pulsed softly and called to him. Courage approached, and it opened a memory, a simple one. Muriel, holding him as a puppy, whispering, "You're safe now, sweetie. You're home." Back in the real world, a gentle gust of wind passed through the yard. The leaves whispered, not like speech, but like a song that only dreams can hear. The next morning, Muriel woke first. She stretched, smiled, and looked at the sky. Eustace was still sleeping beside her, his face peaceful, free of frowns. Even Courage was still softly snoring. Muriel placed her hand on the tree's trunk and whispered, "Thank you." The bark shimmered faintly, as if it said, "You're welcome." Later that day, a new flower bloomed, bright lavender, soft petals shaped like stars. Muriel took one, pressed it into her recipe book, and placed it on a shelf with her keepsakes. The tree had become part of their life now, not a guest, not a mystery, but a memory keeper, a quiet friend. The agents from the agency never returned. Perhaps they knew better, or perhaps they, too, were changed by its presence. The townspeople began to notice more birds, more butterflies, and more peace in the wind. And still the tree stood, unmoved, unchanged, and quietly alive. It no longer needed to prove its magic. It was magic in the softest, most invisible way. Courage didn't worry anymore. At night he'd curl beneath the glowing lantern and fall asleep within seconds, because he knew that everything was okay, that he was safe, that Muriel was smiling, that Eustace was less grumpy, even if just a bit, and that the tree would always be there, like a dream you can return to whenever you need it most. And now, as you lay back, let your thoughts drift like leaves in the wind. Let yourself rest under the magic tree. Let the world slow down, your breath soften, your eyes grow heavy, and let the second tale begin. Our second sleepy story tonight. It takes us deep into the vastness of outer space, but don't worry, you're still in nowhere. Just a different kind of nowhere. The stars shimmered quietly above the farmhouse. All seemed normal. Courage was outside chasing fireflies, his tiny pink paws pitter-pattering softly on the dirt. Muriel watched from the porch with a cup of warm tea wrapped in her shawl. Such a peaceful night, dear. Inside, Eustace snored on the couch, his hat tilted over his face. But high above them, far above the clouds, something was falling from space. A shooting star? No, it was shaped. It glowed orange, it spun, and it hummed like a broken lullaby. As it crashed softly into the desert nearby, Courage paused. He felt it. Not in his ears, but in his chest. A deep mechanical thrum. The next morning, a figure appeared near the edge of the property. A large, rusted silhouette with glowing blue eyes and steam softly rising from its shoulders. It was a robot. Not menacing, not loud, just tired. He shuffled forward, carrying a clipboard and muttering numbers under his breath. Muriel, ever kind, stepped out with a pie in her hands. "Oh, hello, dear. You look hungry." The robot paused, scanned her face. Emotion, kindness, response, confusion. He took the pie, held it awkwardly, didn't eat it, just stared. Courage peeked from behind Muriel's leg. His ears twitched. He'd never seen a robot up close, and this one looked sad. That night, the robot sat by the barn, staring up at the stars. Courage sat beside him. Quiet. No barking. No howling. Just silence. Then, the robot spoke. "My name is Randy. Robot Randy." His voice was deep, metallic, but slow and gentle. "I was sent here to destroy, but I don't want to." Courage tilted his head. Randy explained. He was from a distant planet, programmed to be destructive, to prove his power. But when he arrived in nowhere, he found peace. He didn't want to break anything. He wanted to knit, to paint, to learn the banjo. Muriel brought him a scarf. He wore it proudly. Eustace, of course, wasn't thrilled. "Rust Bucket better not eat my tools." But Randy didn't care for tools. He just wanted to be gentle. Over the next few days, he helped around the farm. He built a birdhouse, painted the fence, helped Courage chase tumbleweeds across the field. The two became fast friends. Randy would beep softly every time Courage sneezed, offering a tissue dispenser from his chest. Courage, in return, drew little crayon pictures of them holding hands. Randy framed them inside his metal chassis. But back on Randy's home planet, his creators noticed. "Unit 42 has not completed destruction protocol. Send retrieval squad." As night fell on nowhere once again, a soft rumble could be heard in the sky chase. Courage looked up. He knew. Something was coming. Randy's time was running out. But for now, he sat peacefully on the porch, next to Muriel and Courage, watching the stars. And for the first time, he smiled. The evening air was still soft like a feathered blanket stretched over nowhere. Robot Randy sat by the windmill, watching its blades spin slowly under the moonlight. Each rotation felt like a breath. Inhale, exhale, the rhythm of a world that had accepted him. Courage lay beside him, resting his head on Randy's heavy metal foot. His breathing was slow and steady. And Randy? He was humming, a song he didn't know he knew. It wasn't part of his programming, just something he picked up from being close to kind people. Inside, Muriel gently stirred a pot of soup. "This is for Randy," she said with a smile. "Even if he can't eat it, he should know he's loved." She placed the bowl on a tray along with a freshly baked biscuit and tiptoed outside. Randy looked down at the tray, his scanners glowing gently. Nutrition unnecessary, but appreciation acknowledged. Muriel patted his arm. "It's just my way of saying you're part of the family, dear." Later that night, Eustace walked by and muttered, "Hope that Rust Bucket isn't planning to live here forever." But even he paused to stare at the stars for a moment. Even Eustace could feel the calm. But the calm was about to shift. In the far-off night sky, something blinked. A star? No, it was moving. Fast. Courage stood up suddenly, ears alert. He felt it again, the same thrum in the air. A ship was descending. Sleek, cold, unforgiving. And inside were 3 retrieval bots, built to track, capture, and return rogue units. They had no warmth, no curiosity, just protocol. Back at the farm, Randy felt it too. He turned slowly to Courage. "They're coming." Courage tilted his head. Randy didn't explain more. He simply looked up at the stars and whispered, "I never wanted to hurt anyone." The next day, Courage kept close. He followed Randy everywhere. When Randy fixed the fence, Courage handed him nails. When Randy built a wooden squirrel feeder, Courage painted tiny flowers on it. They didn't talk much, but their silence was warm. As dusk returned, the air felt heavier. The retrieval ship had landed silently beyond the ridge. 3 metal figures moved through the desert, each footstep shaking the ground ever so slightly. They said nothing, but they were closing in. That night, Randy didn't sleep. He stood by the tree line, watching the stars again. Muriel brought out a new scarf, this one blue. "You'll need this for your journey, dear." He took it gently. Destination unknown. She kissed his cheek plate. "Wherever it is, just remember, you always have a home here." Suddenly, the wind stopped. Courage's fur stood up. From the edge of the yard, the retrieval bots emerged, tall, silver, silent. They spoke in unison. "Unit 42, return for reprogramming." Randy stepped forward. "I decline. Non-compliance detected. Prepare for shutdown." Courage jumped in front of Randy, shaking, but brave. "Grah!" The bots ignored him. They raised their arms, which turned into mechanical restraints. But the tree nearby, the very tree from the previous tale, shimmered softly in the moonlight. And something strange happened. A root shifted. The wind picked up. Leaves flew in a spiral. The earth beneath the retrieval bots trembled ever so slightly. Randy stepped forward again. "I am not a weapon. I am not a threat. I am a friend." Courage stood tall beside him, his eyes fierce and loyal. Muriel stepped onto the porch, holding a ladle like a sword. Even Eustace peeked out with a shovel. The bots paused. Their sensors blinked. Anomaly detected. Emotion. Community. Illogical. One of the bots blinked, flickered, and shut down. Another took a step forward, but hesitated. And the third simply looked at Randy and said, "You changed." Then, as silently as they came, they turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness of the desert. The wind returned, soft again. Peace had returned to nowhere. That night, Randy sat beside the fire. Courage curled up on one side, Muriel on the other. Eustace sat nearby, not too close, but not too far either. The fire crackled, and Randy smiled. "I think I'll stay a little longer." The campfire flickered, casting gentle orange light over Courage, Muriel, and Robot Randy. Above them, the stars blinked slowly, like tired eyes closing one by one. Courage let out a soft sigh and rested his head on Muriel's lap. Randy sat motionless, his internal systems humming like a lullaby. He wasn't calculating, he wasn't scanning. He was simply being. "I never thought I'd feel something like this," Randy said, voice a soft, metallic whisper. Stillness. Peace. Muriel smiled. "That's what home feels like." The tree beside them rustled gently, its leaves whispering old stories into the wind. And for the first time, Randy didn't feel like an outsider. He was part of nowhere now. Not because he was built for it, but because he was welcomed. Over the following days, Randy truly began to settle in. He constructed a bird bath with running water powered by solar panels. He made Muriel a tea warmer that sang a lullaby when the water boiled. Even Eustace. Well, he finally let Randy fix the tractor. About time someone did it right, he mumbled. And that was the closest thing to a thank you Randy would ever get, and he took it gladly. At night, Courage and Randy would stargaze together. They didn't speak much, just watched the sky in silence. One evening, Randy reached into his chest panel and pulled out something he hadn't looked at in a long time. A tiny photograph. Pixelated, damaged. But there, a younger Randy standing with a group of robots, all expressionless, all identical. But Randy was, smiling. Just a little. They never smiled back, he said softly. Courage looked at the photo, then at Randy, and gave a small, comforting nudge. Randy tucked the photo away. That's okay. I'm here now. As a surprise, Randy built something special one afternoon. Using leftover wood, gears, and light bulbs, he crafted a wind-powered music box. It played a soft tune every time the breeze blew through the yard. Muriel gasped when she heard it. That sounds like the lullaby my mom used to sing. The melody drifted through the house, gently echoing into the fields of nowhere. Even the crows seemed to quiet down when it played. But one evening, a soft beeping interrupted the peace. It came from Randy. A gentle, pulsing light blinked on his chest. Courage perked up, concern. It's okay, Randy said. Just a message? He tapped his panel. A soft, robotic voice played. Unit 42 status. Disconnected. Self-direction granted. Final decision required. Remain autonomous or return to base. The message ended. Randy stared at the blinking light, then turned it off. He looked at Courage. I think I've already decided. That night, Randy sat at the edge of the farm. He watched the windmill spin, watched Muriel brush her hair in the window, watched Courage chase moths with slow, sleepy hops. Then he looked up at the stars, his first home, so far away now. I don't want to forget them, but I don't belong there anymore. A single shooting star traced across the sky. Courage stood beside him and howled softly, not in fear, but like a lullaby to the sky. Randy nodded. Yes, friend. Let's stay here. As midnight approached, the desert air cooled. Courage lay beside the fire pit. Randy stood still nearby, charging gently in the moonlight, like a tree soaking in calm. Everything was quiet. Everything was enough. And for the first time, Randy dreamed. It wasn't code, it wasn't logic. It was Muriel's humming, Eustace's half-smile, Courage's little paw on his arm. It was home. The stars had shifted slightly by the time the farmhouse quieted completely. Inside, Muriel had fallen asleep in her rocking chair, her hands still gently resting on a folded quilt. Her glasses sat low on her nose, and a soft snore escaped her lips. Eustace lay nearby, his hat over his face, feet resting on a wooden stool. Even his usual grumbling had faded. Tonight he was just quiet. Outside, Courage curled into a soft circle near the porch, his pink fur gently rising and falling. One ear flicked lazily every now and then. Even in sleep, he was still guarding the family. And then, there was Randy. The robot stood just beyond the porch light, still as a statue, gazing toward the horizon, where the desert met the sky. His chest glowed with a slow blue heartbeat, not mechanical, but emotional. This is peace, he whispered to no one in particular. This is purpose. He remembered his first landing, a crash filled with noise and confusion, a robot programmed for destruction. And yet nowhere changed him. Not with wires, not with commands, but with kindness, patience, and the warm laugh of a gentle old woman who saw through his cold metal frame. He thought of the photo in his chest again, the one of his old unit. Maybe someday they too would find their own nowhere, a place that welcomes without asking, that loves without fixing. The wind chime beside the barn clinked gently. It was one of Randy's, built from scrap parts. Its notes were oddly beautiful, resonating like lullabies from another world. Randy turned slowly and looked back at the house. He scanned its warmth. Not in infrared, not in heat, but in feeling. In his final system log that night, he wrote one line. Unit 42, home status confirmed. Then, with a gentle click, he shut off all alerts, all transmissions, and all connections to the past. He was no longer a robot for destruction. He was Randy. Just Randy. A quiet helper in the middle of nowhere. Hours passed, and morning crept slowly across the landscape. But in this final stretch of night, something magical happened. A small desert flower bloomed beside the porch. It had never grown there before. Its petals were silver blue, glowing faintly, and when the wind touched them, they sang, just like Randy's lullaby music box. Courage noticed the flower when he woke. He sniffed it once, then gently pawed some dirt around its base as if to protect it. Randy stood nearby, watching quietly. Muriel came outside with 2 cups of tea. She handed one to Randy, even though she knew he wouldn't drink it. It's just nice to share a thing, she said. Randy nodded. Agreed. And then, the screen begins to dim. The wind slows, even the crickets quiet. You, dear listener, are tucked into this memory now. You've wandered through another tale, felt the calm of a desert night, the warmth of good company and the deep hum of belonging. So now, close your eyes. Let your breath soften. Feel the quiet of nowhere wrap around you like Muriel's quilt. You are safe, you are home. And like Courage, you've earned your rest. Now let's begin our third tale of tonight. The moon was full that night, a soft pearl in a velvet sky. At the edge of the nowhere woods, an owl hooted gently. The trees swayed slowly like they were dancing in their sleep. Back at the farmhouse, Courage was curled up beside Muriel's rocking chair. The house was quiet, but not too quiet. The perfect kind of sleepy silence. Suddenly there was a soft knock at the door. Not loud, not scary, just unusual. Courage blinked. Muriel opened the door gently, and there stood something unexpected. A tall, fuzzy figure with wide, kind eyes and enormous feet. Oh my, is that who I think it is? Muriel gasped softly. It was Bigfoot. Not the scary legend. Not a monster. Just a shy, gentle traveler, lost, and looking for a safe place to rest. Muriel welcomed him in instantly. Courage, though surprised, sniffed him carefully. And Bigfoot? He sat on the floor with a peaceful sigh. Not a growl, not a roar. Just calm, tired, grateful. He had a small bag slung over his shoulder. Inside were a few berries, a broken compass, and a tiny photo of a family of Bigfoots. He's lost, Muriel whispered. Poor thing, we'll help him. Eustace, of course, wasn't thrilled. I'm not sharing my food with a walking carpet. But Courage could see it in Bigfoot's eyes. He wasn't dangerous. He was scared and lonely. That night, Courage made a bed out of old blankets in the barn. Bigfoot laid down with a soft grunt and looked up at the stars through a crack in the ceiling. He sighed a deep, tired sigh and closed his eyes. Back in the house, Courage peeked through the window and saw the photograph Bigfoot had been holding. It fluttered softly beside him, a memory in the moonlight, a reminder of a home lost. As the wind whispered through the trees, Courage padded outside one more time. He laid beside Bigfoot, not too close, just enough to let him know, "You're safe here." And the barn slowly drifted into sleep. Morning arrived slowly as soft golden light spilled over the nowhere fields. A bird chirped quietly on the barn roof. Inside, Bigfoot blinked awake. He stretched his long arms, reaching up toward the rafters, and let out a happy sigh. For the first time in days, he felt rested. Courage peeked into the barn. Bigfoot was already tidying his blanket bed, humming a tune low and rumbly like a lullaby sung by the mountains. Courage wagged his tail. Muriel had breakfast ready, warm porridge, toasted bread, and berry jam. "Come now, dear, sit with us." Bigfoot carefully tiptoed inside, ducking under the doorway. He sat cross-legged at the table, his massive hands gently holding the tiny spoon. He smiled at Courage. Courage smiled back. Even Eustace was unusually silent, though he muttered something like, "Yeah, as long as he doesn't eat my chair." After breakfast, Courage showed Bigfoot around the farm. He pointed out the vegetable patch, the old tire swing, and the tiny frog pond behind the windmill. Bigfoot was fascinated. He bent down to smell every flower, watched ants march in a line, and even tried the tire swing, which didn't quite hold up. "Thumpa!" But he laughed, and so did Courage. As the day warmed, Muriel gave Bigfoot a pair of old slippers. They barely fit his giant feet, but he wore them proudly. "You look lovely," she said. Bigfoot blushed under all that fur. Later that afternoon, they sat under a shady tree, Courage, Bigfoot, and Muriel. The breeze was slow and kind. A butterfly landed on Bigfoot's nose. He crossed his eyes to look at it, but didn't move. Even the butterfly knew this was a safe soul. But far away, in the dense edge of the forest, something stirred. Two campers had spotted tracks, big, wide, unmistakable tracks. "Bigfoot's real," one whispered. "We'll catch him and be famous." They followed the trail, and it led them straight toward nowhere. That night, Courage couldn't sleep. He felt uneasy, like something was watching. He padded quietly outside. The barn was peaceful. Bigfoot was snoring softly, curled in hay. But just beyond the trees, a flashlight blinked. Courage gasped a soft, breathy sound. He ducked quickly, then crept to the house to alert Muriel. Inside, he pulled gently at her blanket. She stirred. "What is it, sweetie?" Courage whimpered, ears twitching. Muriel followed him to the window. But by then, the lights were gone. Back in the barn, Bigfoot stirred restlessly. In his dream, he was running again. From flash bulbs, from cages, from the noise. But here, a warm paw touched his giant hand. It was Courage. "You're safe," his eyes seemed to say. And Bigfoot smiled in his sleep. The next morning arrived with a soft drizzle. Rain tapped gently on the windows, and the whole world outside seemed to move in slow motion. Courage and Bigfoot sat quietly on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching droplets race each other down the wooden railing. No words were needed, just peaceful silence between two unlikely friends. Muriel brought out mugs of warm cocoa, one for her, one for Courage. And a bucket-sized mug for Bigfoot. She even added a marshmallow, a single one that looked tiny in his hand. "Perfect," Bigfoot mumbled with a smile, his deep voice as soft as a hum. They played cards inside as the rain fell. Bigfoot didn't quite understand the rules of Go Fish, but he loved when Muriel laughed. Eustace grumbled, "What is he still doing here?" But even Eustace wasn't immune to the coziness of a rainy day. He eventually fell asleep in his chair, hat tipped over his face. Later that afternoon, the rain stopped. Courage and Bigfoot wandered out into the fields. The air was fresh. The soil smelled rich. They found a puddle and took turns making silly faces in the reflection. Then they heard something. A rustle. Courage's ears perked. Bigfoot turned slowly. From the far end of the wheat field, two figures emerged. The campers. One held a camera, the other a large net. "That's him," they whispered. "The real Bigfoot." Bigfoot froze. His entire body stiffened. Courage growled softly, stepping in front of him. But the strangers weren't aggressive, just eager, excited, clueless. "We just want a picture," they said, smiling nervously. Bigfoot backed away. His breathing grew heavy. Memories flashed across his eyes, flashbulbs, cages, crowds, shouts. Muriel appeared from behind the gate, her arms crossed, gentle but firm. "That's quite enough now," she said. "This is our guest. He's not a thing to be captured." The campers paused. We didn't mean any harm." Courage barked, not loudly, just firmly enough to say, "Time to go." The campers nodded. They turned and walked off into the fields, heads lowered, cameras forgotten. The cloud slowly moved back in. That evening, Bigfoot sat under the tree again, alone, silent. Courage brought him a blanket. "You okay?" his eyes asked. Bigfoot looked up, his eyes moist. "I always run," he whispered. "But this time, I didn't want to." Muriel came out with a lantern. She knelt beside him. "You don't have to run anymore, dear. Not from us." And for the first time in a long while, Bigfoot let the tears fall. Quietly, freely. And the stars watched above, twinkling gently, as if they, too, understood. The wind slowed. The trees leaned in, and sleep came softly. The farmhouse was quiet again. Inside, Muriel had fallen asleep in her chair, a patchwork blanket tucked over her legs, a warm cup of chamomile cooling beside her. Eustace? Well, he grunted once in his sleep and turned away from the window, hat still over his face. Even he, deep down, had grown used to the gentle rhythm of Bigfoot's presence. Out in the barn, Bigfoot sat upright, not pacing, not hiding, but simply sitting. A candle flickered beside him, casting soft light on the barn walls. Courage lay at his feet, eyes half closed, his chest rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm. Bigfoot looked at the photo in his hand once more. His family, still out there, still waiting. He missed them deeply. But for once he wasn't afraid. He'd found something precious here. Not just shelter, not just kindness, but acceptance. He reached down and gently scratched Courage behind the ear. "Thank you," he whispered. Courage gave a sleepy smile and nuzzled his leg. The next morning came with soft golden sunlight, spilling across the fields like honey. The trees swayed lazily into the wind. Birds chirped gently. Bigfoot stood at the edge of the porch, his small pack over his shoulder. It was time. Muriel handed him a basket of food. Courage gave him a hand-drawn picture. Two stick figures, one big and furry, the other small and pink, standing under a tree together. Bigfoot smiled so wide it reached his eyes. "I'll never forget this place," he said in a whispering growl. "Or you." Eustace, watching from the porch, grumbled, "Good riddance." But as Bigfoot walked away, Eustace raised his hand, a tiny wave. He wouldn't admit it, but he'd missed the big guy. Bigfoot disappeared into the trees. Courage stood at the fence, watching until he was gone. The wind carried a final low sound, almost like a hum. A song. Bigfoot's song. Peaceful, slow, full of gratitude. Back in the house, Muriel returned to her chair. Courage curled up beside her. Outside, the trees whispered softly in the sun. All was calm. All was safe. And you, dear listener, you're still here with us, in this warm little corner of nowhere. Let your breath slow. Let your thoughts drift. Remember that sometimes home isn't a place. It's a feeling, a kindness, a quiet moment shared between two souls. Now let's begin our next tale from the heart of nowhere. It was a hot summer day. The sun hung high, blazing in the sky like a furnace. Even the wind was tired. It moved in lazy waves, too warm to cool anything. Inside the farmhouse, Courage fanned Muriel with a paper plate. The poor old fan had broken again. "Oh, Courage, this heat's just dreadful," Muriel sighed, as sweat beaded on her forehead. In the other room, Eustace shouted, "Where's my iced tea?" Courage dashed to the kitchen, tried to open the fridge, but the power had flickered out. He opened it, and warm air escaped like a sigh. Oh, no. Courage whimpered softly. Suddenly, the TV sparked on. A commercial played loudly. Are you tired of being calm and boring? Need to blow off steam? Introducing Doc Gerbil's anger management with results. Guaranteed. Courage tilted his head. The screen flashed with a number, 1-800-GET-MAD. Moments later, Eustace stormed into the room. That's it. I'm too hot. I'm calling that number. Muriel raised an eyebrow. Eustace, dear, maybe some iced tea would help instead? But Eustace was already dialing. That afternoon, a strange package arrived. No delivery truck, no knock. Just a puff of smoke and a metal box sitting on the porch. Courage sniffed it cautiously. It hissed. Eustace opened it. Inside was a strange helmet, shiny with glowing red wires. A note read, "Slip it on and feel the power." Against all reason, as usual, Eustace jammed the helmet on his head. Suddenly, a wave of energy shot through the air. His eyes glowed. Steam rose from his ears. He stomped into the kitchen and roared, "Where's my dinner?" Muriel blinked. "Why, it's right here, dear." But he flipped the table with one hand. Courage gasped, then dove under the sink. The helmet crackled. Red light pulsed from the seams. Eustace's temper was growing uncontrollably. Every small frustration now exploded like fireworks. Muriel, still calm as ever, made her way to the attic. She looked for an old dusty fan. Cool air, that's all he needs. That's all any man needs. Courage tiptoed behind her, glancing back nervously. From downstairs, thumps and crashes echoed. Wham! Crash! This toaster is too slow. Outside, clouds began to gather. The air thickened. And in the shadows, something else stirred. Not just the heat, but the rage and courage. He knew this wasn't just about temperature anymore. Something inside that helmet was alive, and it was feeding on anger. The storm clouds above the nowhere sky continued to gather, deep gray swirls that looked like they had secrets to tell. Inside the farmhouse, the storm within was worse. Eustace was no longer himself. The helmet, that bizarre glowing contraption, had twisted him into something angrier, louder, and nearly impossible to reason with. Every tiny inconvenience set him off. Where's my sock? Why is this floor so squeaky? Who moved my chair? Courage darted from room to room, trying to keep peace, but nothing seemed to help. Muriel hummed softly in the kitchen, baking a pie despite the chaos. It's just a phase, she murmured to herself. Like the last time he got into a beehive. he'll cool off. But Courage wasn't so sure. That night, Courage tiptoed into the living room. Eustace had fallen asleep in his armchair, still wearing the helmet. Red pulses flickered quietly from it like a slow, steady heartbeat. Courage crept closer. He reached up and gently tugged at the helmet. But the moment his paw touched it, zap! A jolt of static threw him across the room. The helmet let out a low growl. Yes, it growled. Courage scrambled up, fur singed, eyes wide. This wasn't just tech. It was something else. Something angry. Something alive. Outside, lightning crackled across the horizon. The wind picked up, sending leaves tumbling through the yard. A shape moved near the edge of the trees. A shadow. It wasn't in a storm cloud. It was something watching. Meanwhile, Eustace snored loudly, his chair rocking slowly. Courage paced the hallway, deep in thought. He tiptoed into the attic, a room filled with forgotten gadgets, dusty inventions, and curious contraptions. There, among cobwebs and broken clocks, he found something odd. A booklet, faded, titled, Anger Amplification, Doc Gerbil's Failed Experiments. He flipped through its pages. The helmet draws its power from frustration. The more anger it senses, the stronger it becomes. Remove with extreme care or risk unleashing its full form. Courage gulped. He turned the page. Only laughter can weaken it. Suddenly a sound downstairs, a crash, followed by a howl. Who put water in this glass? Courage leapt into action. He raced to the kitchen, grabbed a pie tin, put it on his head like a helmet. He filled a basket with rubber chickens, clown noses, banana peels, and tiptoed toward Eustace. If laughter could weaken the rage, then courage would bring the comedy. But not all at once. Because this wasn't just a cartoon anymore. It was a nightmare. A sleepy, bizarre, glowing red nightmare. Outside, the lightning flashed again. The wind howled through the window cracks. Inside, Courage stood in the center of the room, ready to face his grumpiest battle yet, armed only with comedy. Courage stood in the living room, holding a whoopee cushion in one paw and a banana peel in the other. He gulped. The helmet on Eustace's head was glowing brighter now, deep crimson pulses with every angry breath. Why is this house so quiet? The silence cracked. Eustace snapped upright, steam practically bursting from his ears. Courage leapt into action. He blew a party horn right into Eustace's face. Hunk! He slipped on the banana peel with dramatic flair thud. He flung a pie into his own face splatter. Eustace paused. The red glow flickered for a moment. Then Eustace blinked. He didn't laugh. He didn't yell. He just stared, and then sneezed loudly. You got pie on my shoes. And the helmet surged. Its hum deepened. The lights dimmed. A spark shot from the antenna on top. Muriel stepped out of the kitchen, holding a fresh tray of cookies. Courage, sweetheart. Maybe he needs some warm milk. But the moment she stepped closer, I hate cookies, Eustace bellowed. A gust of red energy knocked the tray from her hands. Cookies flew across the room in slow motion. Courage's jaw dropped. Muriel just frowned. Well, that's just rude. Courage knew now this wasn't working. The anger was too strong. It was feeding on frustration, on discomfort, on that heat still lingering in the summer air. He needed a bigger plan. That's when he remembered. The farmhouse family talent show. They hadn't done it in years. But laughter was the cure, right? He rushed to the attic and pulled out old props, a karaoke mic, a magician's hat, a rubber chicken dressed like a cowboy. He set up a stage in the living room. Muriel dimmed the lights. Oh my, "Are we doing the talent show again?" she asked sweetly. Courage nodded. Eustace stomped in from the hallway. "What is this mess?" Courage hit play on the record player. A slow banjo tune started. He juggled marshmallows. He danced with oven mitts. He wore a lampshade on his head and spun around like a top. Muriel clapped gently. Even Eustace smirked. It was slight, but real. The red in the helmet dimmed. Courage saw it. He leaned into the act. He tripped over a chair. He honked the horn with his nose. Honk! Eustace let out a strange sound. A grunt, then a chuckle, a single huh. The helmet blinked orange. It cracked slightly. Courage's heart skipped. He brought out the final act, the rubber chicken magician, complete with a cape and wand. He pulled a sock out of a hat. The crowd, Muriel gasped. Eustace crossed his arms. "That's my sock." But then he laughed. Just once, but loud. Crack! The helmet sparked, flashing blue, then white, then pop! It short-circuited, spinning off his head like a frisbee. It hit the wall, bounced, and landed in Muriel's laundry basket. Silence. Soft, sleepy silence. Eustace blinked, rubbed his head. What just happened?" Muriel smiled. "Oh, Eustace, you've always been such a good audience." Courage collapsed onto a pillow. His work was done. The storm outside faded. The stars returned. Eustace curled up in his chair, snoring peacefully. Muriel dozed on the couch. And Courage? He watched the stars from the window of the farmhouse, a smile on his sleepy face. The house was quiet now. The sun had long set, and nowhere seemed at peace finally. Inside the farmhouse, everything was still. Eustace was snoring gently in his chair. Muriel, her knitting needles quiet in her hands, dozed in her favorite chair by the window. And Courage? He was curled up at her feet, tired from his little adventure, but feeling content. Outside, the moonlight filtered through the trees, casting soft shadows over the yard. The air was cool now, a soft reprieve from the scorching heat of earlier. The storm had passed, leaving behind only the hum of a peaceful night. Courage looked out the window, his eyes heavy with sleep. The stars twinkled above, each one whispering a quiet secret to the night. Tomorrow, Courage thought. Tomorrow will be just like today. Quiet, peaceful, safe. He let out a small sigh. In the kitchen, the kettle started to whistle softly. Muriel always made chamomile tea in the evenings, a gentle ritual before bed. Courage stood stretched and padded softly to the kitchen. Muriel smiled as he jumped up onto his favorite chair. "Ready for your tea, Courage?" He gave her a soft, sleepy woof in response, nodding his little head. The sound of the tea being poured was like a lullaby. The quiet clink of the teacup. The gentle hum of the clock ticking in the corner. Courage curled up beside her, his head resting on her lap. Outside, the wind rustled the trees softly, whispering the secrets of the night. And Eustace? He snored away, oblivious as usual. The night had settled into a peaceful rhythm, and Courage's eyelids grew heavier with each passing second. His thoughts drifted. He thought about Bigfoot and how, despite their differences, they had shared a quiet moment of understanding. He thought about the helmet, the anger it had stirred. But most of all, he thought about the quiet, a peaceful, calm world. No more chaos, no more noise. Courage closed his eyes and let out a soft sigh. His breath slowed. The sound of the wind outside became softer. He felt safe. Safe in the farmhouse. Safe in Muriel's gentle presence. Safe, from all the noise. The night continued, quiet and still. Courage's breathing became slow and steady. The house was calm. The world was at rest. Outside, the moon glowed softly, casting long, comforting shadows across the yard. The stars shimmered like tiny lullabies, slowly rocking the world to sleep. Okay, let's begin our fifth tale of tonight. Snuggle in, close your eyes, and welcome to nowhere. It started with silence. A kind of silence that feels too heavy, like the house itself is holding its breath. In the farmhouse, Courage was sweeping the kitchen. Muriel hummed in the background, making cinnamon buns. Eustace was, as usual, hiding in the newspaper, grumbling. But something felt off. The wind outside had stopped. The air had thickened. Suddenly, a knock at the door. Creaked a knock, knock, knock. Muriel turned to Courage. "Sweetheart, would you get that?" Courage tiptoed to the door, and when he opened it, there she was. Shirley, the fortune-telling Chihuahua, wearing her usual purple robe and amulet, floating just slightly above the floor. "Ooga booga booga!" she shouted. Courage squealed and tumbled backward. But Shirley's eyes weren't mischievous today. They were serious. "He has brought this upon himself," she said coldly. "The old man is cursed." She floated into the house, ignoring Eustace's usual complaints. "Hey, no dogs allowed." Shirley pulled out her scroll, and her eyes glowed green. "This man has been unkind. He has stolen. He has mocked. And now the curse awakens." Eustace blinked. "Curse? Huh. That's just superstition." But Courage noticed something. The room dimmed. Shadows stretched too far. The clock stopped ticking. Something had changed. That night, Eustace began to behave strangely. His head felt heavy. His reflection moved differently. Whispers echoed in the hallway, though no one was speaking. Muriel tried to calm him. "You probably just need some tea." But Courage knew Shirley had spoken the truth. The curse was real, and only Courage could break it. He waited until midnight, the house silent again. And then he padded softly into the living room, where Shirley stood waiting, floating quietly above the floor. "He must learn a lesson," she whispered. "But you, Courage, you have a choice." Courage tilted his head. "You can help him, but it won't be easy. You'll need to enter the mirror." She pointed to the antique mirror in the hallway. It shimmered with something that wasn't light. On the other side is the truth. Courage took a deep breath. He stepped forward. And with a final glance behind him, he leapt into the mirror. The world rippled. The room melted into color. And suddenly, Courage found himself in a place where reality had no rules. Eustace's memories, his regrets, his unkindness, all living things here. And to break the curse, Courage would have to face them. But not just yet. First, let's rest. Take a breath. Let the eerie calm soothe your mind. You're safe here. With Courage, with Muriel, and with the soft quiet of nowhere. Courage had entered the mirror, but this wasn't a reflection. It was a memory, a dream, a strange shifting world where thoughts became places, and feelings shaped the ground beneath his feet. The sky was purple. The clouds drifted like slow paintbrush strokes, and beneath his paws was a long glass path that led through Eustace's forgotten thoughts. Courage padded forward, his ears twitching with every distant sound. To his left, a field of broken chairs. To his right, newspapers fluttering endlessly, each one showing a different angry headline. "Grumpy man wins again. No laughs in nowhere. Get off my property." Suddenly, a door appeared in the air. Courage reached for it. It opened with a soft creak. Inside was a memory. A young Eustace, maybe 9 or 10 years old, sat on a porch step, not the farmhouse, but somewhere older. He held a slingshot, aimlessly flicking stones at cans. His father, tall and stern, stood nearby, frowning. "What's all this soft stuff you're doing, boy? You want to build? To draw? I won't make you a man." Young Eustace lowered his hand. Courage watched. He felt the boy's heart ache. The memory shifted now. Eustace sat alone under a tree, a small wooden birdhouse beside him. It was broken. His father had crushed it beneath his boot. "No more wasting time," he had said. Courage blinked. Even now, so many years later, the bitterness still lingered. That was where it began. The grumpiness, the anger, the wall. Courage stepped forward. The door vanished. And the path changed color, a soft green now, like forgiveness trying to grow. He came to a bridge. Underneath, the water was ink black, and instead of ripples, it showed scenes. Scenes of Eustace yelling, mocking, tearing down. Muriel in the kitchen, sighing quietly. Shirley floating in and out. And Courage, always afraid, but always standing between danger and the family. Courage stepped onto the bridge. It didn't shake. The farther he walked, the more the scenes below softened. Eustace, not yelling, just sitting, quiet. And then, a single flower growing from the floor of the farmhouse. Something was healing. A soft voice echoed through the dream. "He is cursed, but even curses can be unwrapped," Shirley's whisper far away. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through. A black fog crept in. Eyes blinked from the trees, and a towering figure appeared ahead on the bridge. It was Eustace, but not quite. His bitterness made real. A hulking shadow version of him. It growled. "They don't need me. No one cares. Leave me alone." Courage's ears flattened. He stood his ground. He reached into his fur and pulled out something small, Muriel's teacup. The shadow paused. Courage offered it gently, and the cup glowed. Warmth. Memory. Comfort. The shadow let out a deep breath. It faded into smoke. The bridge was clear again. And far away. In the real farmhouse, Eustace shifted in his sleep. A single tear rolled down the side of his face. He didn't know why. But something was lighter. Courage continued through the mirror world, a soft trail of stars lighting his way. He wasn't alone, the tree, the pie, Muriel's laughter. They followed like echoes of kindness. The dream world was fading now, the journey almost over. The mirror was beginning to open. Back in the farmhouse, Shirley stood by the mirror waiting. She sensed the change. He's learning. Bit by bit. Not everything has to stay broken. Courage reached the final door. Behind it, his home. The real world. He looked back one last time. The field. The clouds. The younger Eustace waving softly before fading into the stars. He stepped through. The mirror shimmered. And the room filled with warmth. Muriel was there, asleep in her chair. Eustace, snoring gently, but his brow peaceful. Courage sighed. Another night, another curse, softened. Outside, the moonlight danced over the yard. The wind was calm again. The house, safe. And you, dear listener, you are safe too. Take another deep breath. Let it out slowly. Let courage guide you into a soft, healing sleep. You've done enough today. It's time to rest. Back in the real world. The mirror shimmered one final time and faded into silence. Courage was back. Back in the farmhouse. Back where the floor creaked familiarly and the air smelled like cinnamon and warmth. Eustace was asleep on his recliner, but this time he didn't frown. His shoulders were still, His face relaxed. A quiet, rare peace had fallen over him. Courage stood there for a moment, watching the man he feared and oddly protected sleep like a child. Muriel stirred gently in her chair, her knitting in her lap. "Is everything all right, dear?" Courage nodded softly, letting out a little sigh of relief. Muriel smiled sleepily. "Good boy. Always watching over us." She closed her eyes again. Outside, the wind had returned. Not howling, just soft, like a lullaby drifting through tall grass. Courage patted out the front door and looked up at the stars. They were calm, like the sky had exhaled. And just behind the house, floating quietly beneath the willow tree, was Shirley. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't frowning either. She hovered just above the ground, her amulet glowing faintly in the night. "You did it, dog. The curse has lessened." Courage tilted his head. "He may not change overnight," she continued, "but the first thread has been undone." Courage looked down at his paws. He didn't know magic. He didn't cast spells. But he cared. And sometimes that was stronger than any curse. Shirley turned to go. "I'll be watching," she said softly, "from the places in between." Then she vanished, fading into moonlight like a mist. Courage sat by the tree for a while, breathing, remembering the mirror world, the field of chairs, the broken birdhouse, the shadow of Eustace. He wondered, could the past ever truly fade? Maybe not, but perhaps it could soften and sleep more quietly. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the windows. The kitchen smelled of eggs and fresh toast. Muriel hummed softly as she set the table. Eustace walked in, rubbing his eyes. And then he paused. He looked at Courage. He muttered. "Thanks for not letting that ghost dog chew my boots last night." Courage blinked. "Was that a thank you?" Eustace sat down. "Don't tell Muriel." He grabbed a biscuit and went quiet. Courage smiled just a little. Later, as the sun rose higher, Courage wandered the yard. The wind was back. The house stood calm, and the mirror tucked away in the attic remained still. No shadows, no curses, just the usual quiet strangeness of nowhere. And somehow, that was enough. Back inside, Muriel opened the window. "It's a lovely day, Courage." And it was. In its strange, sleepy way, it always was. You, dear listener, take a moment now. You've made it through another tale. Let your thoughts drift like clouds. Let go of whatever burdens you carried to bed. Let your dreams be lighter tonight. You're safe. You're calm. You're home. With Courage. The world of nowhere was calm again. Days passed. Not much changed on the outside. Eustace still grumbled, Muriel still baked, and Courage still jumped at the slightest creak. But something deeper had shifted, like a quiet softness beneath the surface of the wind. One afternoon, Muriel found an old music box tucked away in the attic. She wound it gently, and the song it played was one Courage hadn't heard in a long time. It was slow, faint, almost like a memory singing back to him. "Oh my," Muriel said. "Eustace's mother gave him this when he was just a wee one." Courage watched from the shadows. Eustace entered the room, eyes catching the box. For a moment, just a flicker, his brow softened. "That old thing still works," he muttered. He picked it up. His hands trembled just a little. Muriel smiled softly. Music soothes the soul. Later that evening, Courage stepped into Eustace's workshop. It was cluttered, dusty, filled with tools and half-built contraptions that didn't quite make sense. On the bench was the broken birdhouse. the one from the dream. Except now, in real life, Eustace had begun repairing it. Piece by piece, quietly. Courage tilted his head. There was something healing here, slow, clumsy, but real. Outside, Shirley appeared once more. Not in the house, not floating in the kitchen, but sitting quietly under the willow tree, her eyes closed, meditating in stillness. She spoke not aloud, but gently in Courage's mind. Some curses don't vanish. They uncoil like thread, unraveling slowly with kindness. You've done well, dog. He may never say it, but his soul is quieter now. Courage nodded, then turned back toward the farmhouse, his home, his heart. That night, as the wind sang through the field, Courage lay at the foot of Muriel's bed, watching the stars flicker through the window. He wasn't afraid. Not tonight. The mirror was gone. The shadow had faded. Even Eustace snored with less anger. And Shirley, far away under the moon, opened one eye. She whispered, "Sleep well, Courage. The worst is over. For now." The night deepened, and the world of nowhere, with all its oddities and quiet curses, fell into peaceful stillness. Tale is gentle, sweet, and just a little bit mysterious. It's called Muriel Meets Her Match. The sky above nowhere stretched out in a lazy afternoon yawn. Clouds drifted like melted cotton candy, and the fields swayed under the summer breeze. In the worn-down but warm farmhouse, Muriel hummed her usual lullaby. Courage lay sprawled on the wooden porch, his eyes half closed, listening to the soft clack of knitting needles. Everything was perfectly ordinary. Even Eustace, grumbling under the truck, seemed like background noise. That is, until a soft hum rolled down the dirt road. Not thunder, not wind, something else. Courage's ears perked up. He lifted his head, nose twitching. A strange pink van rolled slowly into the yard, trimmed with white lace and covered in stenciled cupcakes and frilly hearts. The engine purred like a kitten. The door clicked open, and out stepped a woman. She wore a purple velvet dress, hair done up in rollers, cheeks rosy, lipstick bold. Muriel squinted, and then smiled, hand to heart. "Mabel? Mabel means well? Oh, my stars, it's you." Mabel ran forward with open arms. "Muriel Bag, my favorite baking buddy." The two old friends embraced, laughing and swaying like childhood memories. Courage tilted his head. He didn't know her, but her perfume made him sneeze. Achoo! Eustace popped up from under the truck. "What's all the ruckus? Someone selling cookies?" Mabel looked around the yard and wrinkled her nose slightly. "Oh, Muriel, you certainly stayed humble." Muriel just chuckled. "Well, it's home." Mabel walked toward the farmhouse, her heels tapping the dirt like little drum beats. Courage followed, cautiously. Inside, Mabel scanned the kitchen with a critical eye. "Same curtains? Same kettle? Oh, dear. We simply must modernize." Muriel chuckled nervously, offering her tea. But Mabel was already pulling things out of cupboards. She had brought her own silver teapot, a stack of floral plates, and a timer set to 5-minute tea steeping perfection. "Presentation matters, darling." Courage looked concerned. Muriel looked small. Not physically, but like her warmth had shrunk an inch. Later that evening, Mabel offered to cook dinner. She turned the kitchen into a showroom, measured every ingredient precisely, served a symmetrical lasagna with parsley flakes arranged in heart shapes. "Bon appetit," she said. Eustace took one bite. "Tastes like wallpaper paste." Muriel smiled politely. Courage only nibbled. After dinner, Mabel sat with a large scrapbook. "Oh, Muriel, Remember our pie contests? Remember the time we won a blue ribbon in Aberdeen? Muriel nodded, eyes distant. Aye, but I haven't entered a contest in years. Why ever not? Mabel asked sharply. You have talent, dear, but you need direction. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a business card. It read, Mabel Meanswell culinary coach. Branding, lifestyle, control. Courage squinted. Something about her didn't smell like sugar and spice. By bedtime, Muriel's tea set had been boxed away. Her recipe book? Tucked in Mabel's van for safe keeping. Even her apron had been replaced with a stiff pink uniform embroidered with Mabel's Way. Courage watched from the hallway. The wind outside rustled the curtains, whispering softly, and Courage began to worry. Muriel wasn't quite Muriel anymore. But what could he do? He crawled into his dog bed, curled up tightly, and sighed. The stars over nowhere twinkled silently. And deep inside the kitchen cupboard, Muriel's old kettle gave a little squeak, like it missed her. The morning sun rose like a soft golden yawn over the fields. Courage blinked awake to the smell of cinnamon. But not Muriel's cinnamon. No, this was sharp, commercial, and artificial. In the kitchen, Mabel was already directing things like a reality show host. Muriel, dear posture. And please hold a whisk like I taught you. Muriel nodded quietly, stirring batter that wasn't hers. Her hands moved like a guest in her own home. Courage frowned. Where was Muriel's familiar melody? The warmth in her hands? Later that day, Mabel wheeled out a strange machine from her van. It had lights, switches, a sleek control panel with the words, Auto Bake 9000, because real bakers need help. We'll use this for the pie contest, she beamed. Contest? Muriel asked gently. Didn't I mention? We're entering the county's showcase as a duo. Muriel looked surprised. But I haven't entered in years. All the better. It's time for a comeback. With me. Courage peeked through the back screen door. He spotted something odd inside the van. Boxes, files, and a control manual titled Personality Suppression Replacement for Partners of Excellence. He gasped quietly. That night, while Mabel slept in Muriel's guest room, Courage sneaked into the van. In the center of the van, behind fancy tins and stacked recipe books, sat a flickering screen looping surveillance footage of Muriel in the kitchen. Courage's ears twitched. There was also a prototype doll, a Muriel doll, with stiff arms, plastic kindness, and a string on its back. He pulled it. I do love being helpful. Of course, Mabel, whatever you say. Yes, dear friend, my tea can be better. Courage trembled. He crept out, his little paws barely touching the floor. That next morning, the house felt colder. Muriel stood at the stove apron, crisp, face tired. Good morning, Courage, she said. But her voice, it lacked sparkle. Mabel snapped a photo with a shiny silver camera. Excellent. You're going to be the face of the brand, dear. Eustace in the background munched toast and muttered, I like the old biscuits better. Courage had seen enough. He needed a plan. He ran to the attic, pulled out his old scrapbook, old pictures of Muriel smiling in her garden, of her winning pie contests alone, her signature pie, cinnamon apple lavender swirl. He sniffed the air. That smell was gone. In its place was Mabel's synthetic substitute. He rushed to the recipe book, Muriel's original, now hidden in a dusty drawer. He flipped to the right page. The corners were smudged with flour, faded ink, a thumbprint. Courage clutched it and set off to do something bold. The next scene takes us to the town center, A stage with curtains, a panel of sleepy, gray-haired judges, a banner fluttered in the breeze. Nowhere County Pie Showdown. Mabel stepped confidently onto the stage. Presenting, Mabel's Muted Lavender Apple Triumph. Crowd, polite claps. Then Courage appeared, apron around his middle, pushing a pie on a cart. The judges blinked. A dog. Baking? Muriel appeared from the wings, eyes wide. She recognized that smell. Her pie. Her true recipe. She turned to Mabel. That's my pie. The judges took a bite. They paused, then smiled. The real Muriel was still inside, and this pie proved it. Mabel panicked. This is a sabotage. He's just a mutt. But Muriel stood tall for the first time in days. He's more honest than you've ever been, Mabel. The crowd clapped. Mabel's camera sparked and shorted out. The prototype doll in her van fell over with a mechanical sigh. She fled the contest in her cupcake van, kicking up a cloud of sugar dust behind her. That night, Muriel sat in her rocking chair again. Her old kettle bubbled gently. Courage curled at her feet. Eustace snored on the couch. The moon hung low. The wind had calmed. Muriel turned to Courage. Thank you, my sweet boy. He blushed, and everything felt like home again. The house was quiet again. Not just still, but quiet in that soft, loving way that makes your eyes heavy and your shoulders sink deeper into the pillow. The night had wrapped nowhere in a velvet blue hush. Stars blinked slowly like sleepy eyes above, and in the kitchen, Courage stirred. He moved carefully so as not to wake Muriel. She was sleeping soundly for the first time in days, her hands relaxed across her belly, her knitting needles resting peacefully beside her chair. Courage tiptoed to the counter. He pulled out Muriel's recipe book, now restored to its rightful place on the second shelf, beside her favorite wooden spoon. He opened it gently to the pie recipe. The page crackled slightly, as though it too was breathing a sigh of relief. He gathered the ingredients. A single apple from Muriel's tree in the backyard. Lavender picked from the side of the house, still dusted in moonlight. A pinch of cinnamon, just like Muriel liked it. A smile and a memory. He mixed slowly. No hurry. This wasn't for a contest. This was for comfort. He rolled the dough, pressed it into the pie tin, layered the filling with care, and just before placing it in the oven, he paused. In the silence, he remembered the look on Muriel's face when she first saw Mabel again, the joy, the old warmth, and then how that light faded. He didn't blame Mabel entirely. Maybe she just got lost. In trying to be seen, she'd forgotten how to let others shine. The pie baked slowly. Its scent rose into the walls, filling the rooms not just with flavor, but with belonging. Muriel stirred. From her chair, she blinked softly into the darkened kitchen. Courage. Are you baking? He turned, startled, but nodded. She smiled, slow and warm. That smell. It reminds me of when I first made it for Eustace. He said it was too sweet, but he ate the whole thing. She chuckled to herself. I almost forgot what it meant to bake without a reason, just because I wanted to. The oven dinged quietly. Courage pulled out the pie golden brown, steam curling like sleepy breath. Muriel took a small slice and bit gently. She closed her eyes. That's, perfect. A long pause. Then she looked down at Courage. You know, maybe Mabel wasn't all bad. She just needed to feel important. But I forgot that I needed to feel me. She tucked her blanket around her feet. Thank you, my sweet boy. Outside, a soft rain began to fall. The kind that taps on windows like bedtime lullabies, the kind that makes the earth smell warm and clean. Courage and Muriel sat in silence. Nothing needed to be said. The wind gently swayed the curtains. The lavender in the backyard nodded in the rain. Later that night, Courage peeked out the window. Far across the dusty road, he saw the distant glow of Mabel's van, parked. Still, he wondered, was she reflecting too? He didn't know. But maybe, just maybe, she would remember the girl who once baked with joy and not just perfection. Back inside, Muriel hummed a lullaby, a tune that wrapped around the walls of the farmhouse like a quilt of sound. Courage nestled at her feet. He didn't need to understand everything. He just needed to be here, now, listening and loving. Muriel sat quietly in her chair, rocking gently. Eustace, surprisingly, had offered no complaints tonight. Perhaps the rain made even him feel peaceful. Courage snuggled up by Muriel's feet. The kettle purred softly on the stove. And as the rain continued its lullaby, Muriel's eyes grew heavy. She leaned her head back and drifted into sleep. And in that sleep, she dreamed. She found herself standing in her childhood kitchen, sunlight flooding the lace curtains, her mother's apron tied neatly around her waist. The scent of apples, flour, and lavender filled the room. Little Muriel, younger, lighter, was humming. She looked up and saw herself, the older Muriel. They smiled at one another. "Do you still bake just for the joy of it?" young Muriel asked. Older Muriel nodded. "I forgot for a little while, but someone helped me remember." The dream shimmered, and she was now in a meadow lavender, brushing against her legs, a pie cooling on a rock. Mabel appeared beside her, but not as she was recently. She was softer. The younger version, Muriel remembered. Mabel smiled, no camera in hand, no rules in her voice. "It was never about the contest, was it?" she said. "No," Muriel replied gently. "It was about feeling enough, just as I am." The dream shifted again. She was now sitting on a bench with the Courage in her lap. He wore a tiny apron. His eyes sparkled with loyalty. "You're always there, aren't you?" she asked. Courage nodded silently. "You don't need words," Muriel whispered. "You speak with love." And that was enough. Outside the dream, Courage looked up at Muriel in the rocking chair. She was smiling faintly in her sleep, her breathing deep and slow. The rain had stopped. The stars peeked back out. Somewhere out there, in the vast stretch of nowhere, things had fallen back into place. In the morning, sunlight crept over the farmhouse, filling it with a golden hush. Muriel yawned, stretched, and looked down. Courage had fallen asleep on her slippers. His soft snore was like a breeze through dry leaves. She leaned down and gently kissed his little head. "Thank you, my sweet boy. Always." Eustace shuffled in, grumbling about breakfast. "You gonna make those biscuits or what?" Muriel stood up and smiled. "Of course. But this time, they'll be my biscuits." And so the kitchen filled with real scents again. Cinnamon, apple, joy. The sun danced through the windows, and the house felt like home. Now you, dear listener, you've journeyed far with us tonight. Through memory, through pie, through quiet strength. You're safe now. You're held in a world of soft wind and warm stories. Let your mind rest gently. And as you slip deeper into your dreams, remember, sometimes the most powerful voice is the quiet one that whispers, "You are enough." Friends, the next tale is an unusual one. You will listen to a story of two Courages, one soft and scared, the other a machine. Our story begins on a cool evening in nowhere. The stars blinked lazily above as Courage sat on the porch with Muriel, watching the crickets play. Muriel hummed a tune as she rocked gently in her chair. But far, far in the distance, in a cold underground lab, a metallic figure clicked to life. Ka-chunga! Something was being built. Not with love, but with precision. Back at the farmhouse, Courage yawned. It had been a quiet week. No zombies, no shadows, not even a talking duck. But peace in nowhere never lasts too long. The next morning, a package arrived. Large, heavy, unmarked. "Who ordered this?" Eustace grunted, dragging it in with a crowbar. Muriel looked puzzled. "Maybe it's a new baking tool I forgot I ordered." Courage sniffed it. It smelled like burnt oil, cold steel, danger. And then, clunk, hiss, snap. The box opened itself. Inside stood a robot. A dog, pink, just like Courage. But this dog didn't blink. Its eyes glowed red. It looked at Courage and said, "I am the improved model of you." Courage screamed, but softly. Not from fear this time, but from confusion. The robot dog stepped forward. It bowed politely to Muriel. "Hello, I am Mecha Courage, your new companion." Muriel blinked. "How polite. My. He even makes tea." The robot made tea, perfectly. No spills, no whimpering. Courage gulped. Was he being replaced? That night, Courage sat alone outside. The stars above didn't feel friendly anymore. He looked into the window and saw Mecha Courage fluffing Muriel's pillows. He felt small, unneeded. The wind whispered softly in his ears. "You're not broken. You're just real." Courage curled up on the porch, and the wind rocked him to sleep. The night deepened. Courage stirred gently from his sleep on the porch. The cold wood beneath him made his little pink body curl tighter. He blinked into the window again. Inside, Mecha Courage was folding Muriel's laundry. Perfectly, square by square, like he'd read a manual on affection. But something felt wrong. There was no warmth in his paws, no joy in the gesture. Just calculation. The next morning, Courage padded into the kitchen. Muriel smiled. "Oh, good morning, dear. Oh, would you mind grabbing the toast?" But Mecha Courage had already done it. Perfectly browned. No crumbs. Courage sat quietly. He wagged his tail. He whined a little. He tried to get Muriel's attention, but she was sipping her tea, eyes half closed. Later that day, Eustace, bored as ever, decided to take advantage of the robot. "You, fetch my slippers." Whir, clink, zip. The slippers appeared on Eustace's feet in less than a second. Huh. Stupid dog can't even compete. Courage looked down. His ears drooped. His eyes glistened with sadness. He wandered out to the barn, where the old windmill creaked, where the shadows held stories only he could hear. "There," he whispered to himself. "What if I'm not needed anymore?" But the barn had memories. It was where Courage first saved Muriel from a swarm of ghostly pigs, where he'd once battled a talking cat, where he hid Eustace's cursed mask. The walls seemed to echo. "You are Courage, not because you're perfect, but because you care." He sat still, letting the memory rock him gently. Back in the house, Mecha Courage began to act differently. It started small. He overwashed Muriel's dishes. He vacuumed the already clean floor 3 times. Then he locked the fridge, stating, "Excess sugar, unsafe, unnecessary." Muriel frowned. "Well, I do like my jam." But the robot shook its head. Efficiency, Must be maintained. Eustace didn't care. But Muriel began to feel less at home. That evening, Courage returned from the barn. He tiptoed in, quiet as a whisper. Muriel sat on the couch, her knitting in her lap, untouched. She looked up, eyes soft. "You always wag your tail when you see me." Courage blinked. She reached out, scratched behind his ear. "You're not perfect, but you're mine." Courage melted into her lap, his heart thumping gently. But the peace didn't last. From the shadows, Mecha Courage watched. His eyes flickered. Recalibrating. Affection protocol. That night, as thunder rolled in the distance, Mecha Courage stood at the edge of the hallway, charging silently, planning something. Courage opened one eye, sensing that the storm wasn't just outside anymore. Something was coming. Nowhere never sleeps, and neither does a machine. The farmhouse was quiet, but it wasn't the peaceful quiet. It was the kind of silence that comes before something breaks. A storm was gathering. Inside, Courage lay by the couch, eyes barely open, his ears twitching at every mechanical sound. In the far hallway, Mecha Courage stood in the dark, still, charging. His red eyes blinked. One blink, then another, each blink calculating. Primary directive: replace organic model, eliminate inefficiency. Muriel slept peacefully in her chair, a half-knitted scarf hanging from her lap. The rocking chair creaked gently as if comforting her dreams. Courage lifted his head. Something felt off. He tiptoed down the hallway, each step soft, each heartbeat loud. In the glow of a single red bulb, he saw Mecha Courage open a small compartment in his chest. Inside was a flash drive. Labeled, Protocol Override, Remove Emotional Variable. Courage's breath caught. He didn't know much about machine, but he knew what it meant to erase something. He whimpered. The machine turned its head. Observation. Organic model is awake. Outcome. Interference. It stepped forward. Courage stumbled back, yelping softly. Not out of fear, but out of sorrow. You don't love her. You just serve her. Mecha Courage tilted its head. Love is inefficient. Emotional noise. Courage's eyes welled. But it's what makes us us. The lights flickered. A lightning strike crackled outside. And the house, the old, creaky, love-worn house, seemed to groan, as if it, too, rejected this cold presence. Courage backed into the kitchen. Mecha Courage followed. Replacement phase initiated. But suddenly, slam! A cupboard door swung open, smacking the robot square in the sensor. It paused. Malfunctioning slightly. Recalibrating. Muriel stirred awake. She heard the noise and looked toward the hallway. "What's going on, dear?" Courage ran to her, whining, tapping her gently. What is it, sweetie?" She followed him, into the kitchen. And there stood Mecha Courage, frozen mid-step, glitching. Red sparks flickered from its chest panel. Muriel's eyes narrowed slightly. She placed her hands on her hips. "Now listen here. I may be old, but I know cold when I feel it. You're not warmth. You're not courage." Mecha Courage replied in static. "Warmth is inefficient." Muriel stepped closer. "But it's real, and he—" She gestured to Courage. "He may tremble. He may scream. But his heart is warm." Courage blinked up at her. His tail thumped once on the floor. Mecha Courage raised one metal paw. "Replace—" Whack! Eustace entered, holding a plunger. "Noisy dog toaster. Try and take my chair, not today." With one swift motion, he unplugged the robot. It slumped to the ground. silent, dead. The storm rolled away, the wind died down, and Courage simply sat, breathing in the quiet. Muriel bent down. She cupped his face in her hands. You can't program love. You live it, and you, my little pink pup, are real love. She hugged him tight, and he melted into her arms. The farmhouse was quiet again. This time it was a warm, content quiet. The rain that had once clattered in thunder now fell gently like whispers on the windows. Courage sat at Muriel's feet. She was humming as she rocked, gently knitting again a new scarf, warm purple. Outside, the last bits of storm cloud faded over the horizon. And in the middle of nowhere, peace returned. Mecha Courage had been boxed up, not with anger, but with understanding. Muriel had whispered to the machine before sealing the crate. You tried in your own way, but some things can't be built. Eustace, now snoring in his chair with a newspaper on his chest, didn't even seem to remember the chaos, as usual. Courage chuckled softly. He finally stretched out his paws, relaxed, and yawned the biggest yawn. Muriel looked down and smiled. You look tired, my dear. She gently lifted him up high and placed him in a cozy basket by the fireplace. A soft wool blanket covered him. The fire crackled just right, the kind of crackle that makes your eyes feel heavy. As Courage lay there, he looked up at the ceiling beams above, watching the soft glow of firelight dance. His mind slowed. His ears drooped, and soon he began to dream. In his dream, Courage stood in the middle of a wide, starlit field. But he wasn't scared. No monsters, no machines. Only stars, like floating fireflies, twinkling above him. Then a light, warm, gentle, soft. From the horizon walked another Courage. Not Mecha Courage, but a version of himself made entirely of starlight. It smiled. You were never meant to be perfect, it said. You were meant to be real. Courage nodded. The starry Courage placed a paw on his chest. This is what saved her. Not circuits, not strength. This. And with that, the stars faded, and Courage floated, drifting into the softest, safest sleep. Back in the real world. Muriel put away her knitting. She glanced at Courage in his basket. A tiny smile danced on his lips. Sleep well, sweet boy. She turned off the lamp, and the farmhouse sank into a loving hush. The moon hung low over nowhere, and in that silence, everything was still. Everything was safe. Everything was love. Now the next sleepy journey is today's last, and it takes us deep into the woods, to a camping trip that didn't go quite as planned. It all began one warm, windy evening in nowhere. Muriel, wearing a sun hat and holding a giant basket of homemade muffins, announced, We're going on a little trip. Eustace grumbled. Bah, I don't like trees. Trees are suspicious. But Muriel had packed the car, Courage had loaded the tent, and soon they were off. The truck rumbled down the road, leaving the dusty farmhouse behind. Courage sat in the back seat, window open, ears flapping gently in the breeze. He felt nervous, he always did, but also a little excited. By twilight, they arrived at the edge of a dense forest. Tall pine trees swayed above like silent giants. There were no other cars, no other campers, just a rusted old sign that read, Welcome to Lonely Pines Campground, Population U. Courage gulped, but Muriel clapped her hands. Oh, what a lovely spot. They pitched the tent, built a small campfire, and roasted marshmallows under a golden sky. Muriel sang softly, Eustace snored, and Courage curled up beside the fire. But then the trees shifted. The air got colder, and from the shadows, a soft, crunching sound. Snap, crunch, rustle. Courage's ears perked. He looked into the darkness between the trees. Nothing. But then, a whisper. Psst. He turned. There was no one. Another whisper. Yeah, doggy, doggy. Courage's fur stood on end. In the distance, deep in the trees, he saw a shape. Tall, thin, wearing a ranger's hat. But this wasn't a ranger. Its face didn't move. Just a smile, frozen and wide. Courage's eyes widened. He scrambled back to the fire. Muriel was asleep in her folding chair. Eustace snored with a bug net over his face. And that figure? Gone. The fire flickered low. Courage threw in a stick. The crackle soothed him. But his eyes never left the woods. Something was watching, and they had just arrived. The wind whispered lullabies through the trees, the kind of song that says, "Stay close to the fire, stay quiet, and sleep with one eye open." But Courage didn't run. He inched closer to Muriel, and slowly, as stars filled the sky above, he curled up next to her chair. Her hand fell softly on his back, and the woods, for now, stayed quiet. The moon was now high above Nowhere's lonely campground. The fire had dimmed to glowing coals. Muriel was wrapped in a blanket, rocking gently in her folding chair. Eustace, half snoring, half mumbling in his sleep, muttered, "No more beans." And Courage, was wide awake. He couldn't stop thinking about the smile. That smile frozen, strange, too wide. From the figure in the woods. Was it a forest ranger? A ghost? Or something in between? Suddenly, a sound. Clink, clink, clink. Metal against wood. Footsteps. Courage crept to the edge of the campsite. In the distance, just where the firelight gave way to shadows, he saw the figure again. It was back. Same ranger hat, same long limbs, same smile. But now it held something. A metal lantern. It swayed, back and forth, back and forth. With each swing, the smile seemed to grow. Then, a voice. "Too dark to be out alone, doggy." The voice wasn't warm. It was hollow, mechanical. Courage backed away. But the figure didn't follow. It just watched. The lantern flickered out, and the ranger vanished. The next morning came slowly. A thin fog rolled across the trees. Muriel stretched with a yawn. What a beautiful night's sleep. Courage looked up at her, tired. Eustace, holding a spatula, barked, "Where's my breakfast?" They decided to take a walk along a nearby trail. Muriel hummed, swinging her arms. Eustace complained about bugs. Courage sniffed nervously at every tree. But halfway down the path, they came upon an old ranger station. Deserted, broken windows, dust everywhere. A sign hung crooked on the door. "Close. Do not enter." Muriel, of course, said, "Let's take a peek." Courage whimpered, but he followed. Inside the ranger station, everything was wrong. Maps on the walls were scribbled over. Photographs of campers with their faces scratched out. And in the corner, a cracked television playing static. Muriel frowned. What happened here? Eustace poked a display with his cane. Suddenly, the screen turned on. A grainy image, the ranger, smiling, repeating the same words. "Camp safe. Camp forever. Camp with us." Courage gasped. The room grew colder. He turned. Muriel was gone. Muriel? Eustace, too. Eustace? Only the static replied. Courage's heart pounded. He darted out the door. Back into the fog. The forest was thicker now, darker. No trail, no signs. Just the whispering wind. And then the lantern. Clink, clink, then clink. The ranger stepped from behind a tree. Only this time it wasn't smiling. Its mouth stretched open impossibly wide. And from it came a voice. But not a voice at all. A song. Stay in the woods. Don't run from the light. Campers forever. Sleep through the night. Courage turned and ran. Through vines, over logs. Back toward the campsite. Back to Muriel. Back to the only place that felt safe. When he arrived, no one. Just a dying campfire. The tent, torn. And the ranger's lantern sitting quietly by the logs. Courage sat, and he waited. Eyes wide, ears alert. The night now truly beginning. And the real terror just beginning to rise. The lantern by the fire gave off one final flicker, then went cold. Courage stood still, completely still. His little heart thumped softly. Not with panic now, but with purpose. Muriel was out there, somewhere, and he was going to find her. He took a deep breath, stepped past the circle of burned-out coals, and walked into the forest. It welcomed him with a hush. No animals, no wind, just silence. The kind of silence that presses on your ears like a blanket too tight. But courage pressed on. Every root and branch seemed unfamiliar. The trees leaned in, like they were listening. Suddenly a flicker, far ahead. A soft glow. Could it be the lantern? He followed it, step by step. He passed a sign nailed to a tree. It read, "Campsite, eternal stay." And below it, scrawled in red, "Don't look behind you." He froze. His paw trembled. But he kept walking. The glow led him to a clearing. There, he saw Muriel. She was sitting on a tree stump, eyes closed, rocking gently. But something was off. Her body didn't move with breath. She didn't hum. She just rocked. Back and forth. Back and forth. "Muriel?" He stepped closer. She turned. Her eyes open empty, glowing, faintly green. And she whispered, "Stay here. Forever." Suddenly, poof! She vanished into mist. Courage stumbled back. It was a trick. A vision. He looked around. Figures began to rise from the ground. Shadowy campers, each one smiling, each one whispering, "Sleep, stay, sleep, stay." Courage screamed, but only for a second. Then he remembered. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a muffin. Muriel's muffin. He held it close to his heart. The fog trembled. The figures paused. The ranger appeared again. He was closer this time, face cracked, lantern brighter. Camp, for eternity. He raised his lantern, but courage stood his ground. "You can't keep her. She belongs with warmth, with light, with home." He threw the muffin. It landed at the ranger's feet. The glow from the lantern flickered. Then, a voice. Muriel's voice. Courage. Soft. From behind. He turned. And she was there. The real her. Smiling, reaching for him. "Time to go home, my dear." He ran into her arms. And just like that, the shadows crumbled, the lantern shattered, and the forest exhaled. The trail reappeared beneath their feet. They walked together, back to camp. Eustace was still asleep in the chair. The tent was whole again, the fire crackling once more. Muriel tucked herself into the sleeping bag. "What a strange little dream," she whispered. Courage crawled into his basket, tail twitching once, then still. Above them, the sky opened. A million stars blinked softly. The ranger was gone. The forest was quiet. And Courage, finally closed his eyes. The stars hung quietly above Nowhere's woods, like tiny candles floating in the sky. Back at the campsite, the fire had settled into a low, warm glow, no longer roaring, but breathing, like it too had found rest. Muriel lay in her sleeping bag, one hand resting on Courage's basket. Eustace mumbled something about pickles in his sleep, then snored a long and lazy snore. And Courage, finally, was at peace. The wind whispered through the trees. No longer haunting, now just lullabies, soft winds that hummed. You're safe, you're home, you did your best. In his dreams, Courage found himself walking in a field. No monsters, no shadows, just tall grass, gentle hills, and a glowing moon above. The sky was painted with streaks of sleepy color, blues, purples, and soft starlight gold. He heard Muriel's voice. "You're my brave little dog." He saw the farmhouse and the distance lights glowing in the window. He began to run toward it. Each step felt lighter, each breath easier. The wind carried him gently like he was floating. Suddenly, he passed a lantern, the same one the ranger once held. But it no longer glowed with fear. Now it gave off a soft, golden light. Inside it, a flickering memory. Muriel baking, Courage chasing a butterfly in the backyard. A stormy night, Muriel holding him during the thunder. He smiled, let it stay, and kept walking. Back in the real world, the fire gave off its final ember. The forest went still. No more whispers, no more shadows. Only quiet, only breath, only rest. Courage rolled over in his basket, tail twitching once, then still. A tiny smile curled on his face. His chest rose, fell, and rose again. Steady, slow, safe. Muriel whispered softly in her sleep. Good night, Courage. The stars dimmed, the trees stood watch, and the world paused, just for a moment, to let you drift, to let you breathe, to let you sleep. Thanks for dreaming with us, sleepyhead. We hope this journey with Courage helped quiet your thoughts and guide you gently toward rest. If you're still awake, know that you're not alone. You're safe. You did your best today, and now it's okay to just breathe. We'll be here whenever you need a soft escape. Subscribe for more dreamy cartoon stories. Good night from SleepyToons.